In this episode, I want to create out of single shots and 360 by 180 degree panorama based on all the rows that I have shot. And I want to give you, of course, an idea about all these images. And for that, I go here into my viewfinder. And here I have color-coded already the material that I want to use. And one word to JPEGs, they have more or less an baked-in gamma curve, or at least they have all the values sorted out on a gamma curve, even if we work with a profile from time to time. But whatever we do here, we have the least amount of quality finally compared to RAW files. I use JPEGs, of course, for proxies to check out if my shooting has worked, if I'm short in time and I have maybe done several approaches, so I can see very fast what is working and what is not working for this case. And here for the tutorial, I use the JPEG because we are not interested in the quality at the moment. We are more interested here for this specific tutorial in the procedural, how it works, not how we get the best out of the raw footage. And I will show you that later, of course. Here, first of all, we want to see how it works. So I switch into a different view and I have arranged this here by labels, so I can get here my 40 different one at once. So with a shift click here, I check this 40 is fine. And then I can move this here to the side, grab one here on the icon and drag them just to PDGUI. And that's all I have to do here. And I can go then directly here to PDGUI. It loads now all the data in, and it's JPEG, so it's very small. And we have to wait here a little second. But what we can see here already, it uses the data inside of our images. So we know the focal lengths here already. And we have now loaded all of these, and I have switched the interface back to simple, because then we have here only 5 different tabs, and I want to show these, of course. But this is the starting screen, and I notice I was in advanced. When I click on advanced, I have more tabs here, more confusing. So simple is maybe when you just start with the application to get your first feet wet, and then you go maybe to advanced when you know all of these tabs here. It's a little bit long for one tutorial to explain all of these, but in short, and the most important ones are the project assistants to load images. You can also drag these in. Then align images means you start with the engine to find tracking points, to find the whole fit into the whole system here. And create panorama is here practically the last tab. When you click on this, you go to the last one, and there you finally decide what you want to get out of it. And then we can go here to source images, where we can see where are these files, which size they have, and is everything fine. We can sort them up or down. That is sometimes very important when you want to have a very specific layer order in your Photoshop file, for example. The lens setting, that's sometimes very, very important to know. It's more an advanced tab, and I wouldn't suggest that on the start. But when you work, for example, with shift lenses or with other very specific lenses, and then you can give here some information into it, and you can also see how your lens does finally, because you see for each image then finally numbers when it is done. The project settings, not so important at the moment, but this is the default for output, and you have quite some options here. Please check this out. The crop, that's maybe not really important here for these kind of images, but in the moment, and we will see that later for fisheye, there it is really important to tell the application where the picture really starts. Masking is very important when you want to put some stuff out that you don't want to see, because the application has no idea which part is more important, the food in the picture or the twig. And then we come to image parameters, and that's a longer list, and you can change here, of course, things. When the exposure is maybe completely off, you can change this here. Perhaps you get an OpenEXR where you have to increase maybe around 12 stops, which happens from time to time. when other applications give the wrong values in it, and then you can equalize here everything nicely. Control points. This is a big chapter, and the more this application can do it automatically, the better, because it's really precise. And only when it screws up, I would suggest to set these points by hand. And you click here, and then you click in the neighbor image, and so you have here two areas, and you try to match exactly these points to help in case that the application itself can't do it. And so the preview exposure is also sometimes very useful, because you have maybe other eyes than Pidigui. And then we come here to the optimizer. I want to bring this back here to 0, because it affects not only this area here. It's a little bit tricky, and we don't have here an input value. So I think I leave it here. So optimizer is always very important when you want to move a little bit stuff around and then run the optimizer, so the calculation becomes updated and everything works fine. Exposure and HDRI. If you put more than one exposure per image into it, means 3, 6, 7, 12 or whatever, after this was taken in, you can optimize this, and then you get here in camera response curve. Very important that you do this after everything is in, and only for images that really match to each other. So you can switch between true HDRI, or you can have exposure fusion, but for our needs we want to have true HDRI and no tone mapping. Exactly. I said it. No tone mapping for 3D. And that has, of course, many reasons, and I have explained it in a long way in the HDRI series, so I don't want to do this here again. And the project settings, that's a longer list. Go through it. Maybe something sounds familiar. Otherwise, you have always a help for this screen. That means for everything that you can see in one screen, there is a help available. The preview by itself is, of course, dependent on the images that are included. And with Control E or Command E on a Mac, you get the preview. Create panorama is then this here, and at the moment we have set nothing. This might be different because you can set this up as standard, so you get always OpenEXR or whatever. This is in the preferences, then explore this as well. Okay, so back to the project assistance, and we click here on Align Images, and that means it takes a look to all these images, and I guess first it takes a very rough black and white image, find patterns, and these patterns will be then aligned. And maybe the other way how to explain it is it finds control points, and that is perhaps more the way I would understand it based on the interface, and each point has then a sibling on the neighbor images. And exactly based on these points where they are in each picture and on the data that we have gotten before, it can finally sort out how much distortion each picture needs, perhaps which projection method is the preferred one, and results hopefully in the best picture that you can get out of it. Otherwise you have to change this, of course. I show you that later. And when it's done, back here, and I think it's close to it with the analyzing. Now it creates these control points. And again, it's not always that simple that we just match and fit these images together. Sometimes, excuse me, sometimes the camera goes up, sometimes the camera goes down, and this results, of course, in a complete different distortion of each image. And exactly there comes the overlapping into the game, because the more overlapping we have per neighbor, the more data it can create. If the overlapping is too thin, then it's maybe very difficult. And on a side note, if you have maybe just sky in one picture, then shoot maybe more, so you have the neighbors more overlapped. And here we have the preview already. Okay, so what we can see here, I have not shot the button, and I have used here just to use the camera just down. This color here is the screw in the middle of it, and you can see here that this whole area is a screw, maybe roughly like a dime or so in size, like a little penny, and that creates such a huge area. And we can mask out now here this area and this area to get less of anything here, and I will show you that, of course. So I click this away, and be not afraid, with Command E you are back here. That's pretty simple. And the first thing that I normally do is to go to mask, and then I check out here these pictures. These are the two ones that go up, and then we have two that go down. And have an eye here on that hose, and I will explain this later on with the HDRI series. There we have something that flips. So I take now here the brush with the red, and I paint here just and square around, or rectangular as well here. And a little bit based on the target to show you how to fix problems, I put my foot here in the picture. So I can paint this out. And now PTGui knows exactly this is not what we want to have in the picture. So I use here the bucket to fill these areas to make progress. And I have a little bit left here. I have to paint here over. It takes a time. Oops. There was the bucket active, so I go first to another picture here. Maybe this one. The pencil, not the red, sorry. And here I do exactly the same. And there's of course an option to use or reuse those things when you save this, and you reuse exactly the same mask again, because I do here exactly the same except for this foot. And you see here, this was the brownish border on the button. It's just a small little one. So I have created now here these two areas in both pictures, and you can imagine that what we get here finding out is the Boolean operation of both pictures. One time I can see here the dirt, and one time I can see here the dirt, and that matches then up. So let's have a look here back into our preview. And you see here, I forgot a little bit what I said I will fix later, but now you can see what I have done here. Now we have information here, the food is gone. And from other tests I know that this area here will create problems. I could fix this now, but normally I don't know this, so I leave it here. And I go back to my masks here, and I go back to the pencil, get this stuff out, and here. And now it should be fixed. Nope. And back. And this takes, of course, now your time. And I say sorry for that. Mask. I thought I have created here everything out. Maybe it's the other picture. Exactly, of course. And it's this area here. So I do it a little bit over the top and back to the game. And now it's gone. And I hope that was worth the time to go back and forth to see here finally what happens. And this is now here done already. What I want to show you here is, of course, that we have different projection methods, 3, the main ones, and of course a lot of other projection methods. Please read all about them, because the better you know these applications and the options, the better you are off. And this icon here is very important, because this gives you now the option to just inspect where is one image. Because sometimes you have a lot of images in the middle and you have no idea what hits you. And that happens when inside of the middle these pictures have no control points, and they should be maybe here or here or here. And without control points, PTGui puts them in the middle but uses them. So you have to be careful with that. So I switch this off again. And I want to show you the control points, of course, now that they are available here. And you can control these. I go normally here with this picture, then I have here the other neighbor, then I have the other neighbor here. And so I go always in a ping pong system, so I don't have to click too much. Number 7 is now this one. And you see here, based on the clever laid out colors, that you get here very fast an overview of everything is fine. The green is here, the gray is there, and it looks pretty good. If there is something in leaves and you know that the leaves were shaking a lot, then click on it and delete it, because then it has no value. It was maybe just in time that the twig went to the same position and Pidigui thought, okay, that sounds sane, but in the next picture it will be maybe different, and then you run into ghosts or into problems inside of that. So when I have normally a one row image, and I go here back, then I could grab this here and I do this here and move the whole picture around. And then I create a chaos like this here. But sometimes I need exactly this. And when I do those things, then the whole setup is, of course, a little bit shaken up. And then we have to go back here and we go to the optimizer and we let it run again so it knows exactly what to do. I don't want to have this here, so I go back with Command C. And I hope everything sorts out well again, and it does. And you can see here, other than in Photoshop, it knows exactly here's a border. So we don't have to care too much about it. That works also with one row at all. That brings us finally already to the end, because we can go here now to create panorama. And we have here the low dynamic range, which I mentioned from time to time. There's no medium dynamic range here. And we have several options. I go normally with this kind of size when I have several layers to PSB, because Photoshop is sometimes too small. And you have to decide if you want to have individual layers, then you get a bunch of layers. If you want to have all layers blend in one, or if you want to have them tone mapped. But tone map means nothing for 3D and not usable in your scene, because you can't really set up the light so you get micro contrast on your objects. So this is normally for me off. And when you have maybe this collection here, maybe just these two, you can go ahead and go to Photoshop Large, and you can click here on one and you say maybe 16-bit. And when you have set this up, you get only one file here. In the moment you go back to JPEG, you get here 0 to 0 to 39 and the blended one. So 41 images in the folder, or you get everything in one file. That's huge, of course. So be careful with individual layer. I render them out when I need them. Sometimes with smaller ones I do this, of course, to save time. And HDRI individual layers, HDR blend layers, and HDR panorama. This is a longer story, and in this episode we talk only about LDRIs, JPEGs, previews, proxies, whatever. So what we want to have here is, of course, just the blend layers, and maybe 16-bit is over the top for JPEG, so 8-bit is fine. Normally we need to click here once, maximum size, but for a 360 by 180 degree it has already decided this is the maximum you get out, and I would go with that. Of course, we have here some areas which are more advanced to say which one we want to use here, blending, or which interpolator we use. There we have something like anti-aliasing. I would translate it for Cinema 4D user in that way. Okay, and this output resolution has nothing to deal with our purposes, because we count here pixels and not points per inch. We have no inch in a sky object or something like that. Okay, if you want to exclude some images, that would be then here. And if you don't know which one you want to exclude, then you go here back to this option to just select whatever you think is right. I hope that really fast one time through helps you. And of course, I go here back to my export and I say create panorama. So it writes it now exactly where all these files were. If I save the whole file before I do this, it uses this place to write this file in. It's only one, I will find it, and then I can place it wherever I want, if I was sloppy in the first place. So I will be back when it's done. And so to solve this problem here for the tutorial, I have reduced the whole image size to 2048 pixels wide to make some progress here, and I have created a duplicate here, a copy of the button layer. So we can make some progress here instead of waiting and cutting and so on. I use here pretty much all the time Flaming Pear Flexify 2 for those kinds of stuff. And with large files it really takes a time, but it's fantastic, and even with 32-bit it does a wonderful job. A little bit slow, and you will see this in detail more in the next one. And here we have some options to store files or options in it, and so I click here around, and this here is exactly what we want, and that should flip here soon. So, and here we have equirectangular and zenith inside, and this gives me then here exactly this, and I click here to see it in a larger version. These are now the two pole caps, and the beauty of that is that I had a shot from the top. That should be exactly in the way the floor looks like if I had taken the tripod away and then shot exactly from the same height. But then we go here just with a stamp tool, and I do this here very rough. I do it a little bit more carefully in the next one, I promise. So, and a little bit light here, and that should be all, just for the purpose of demonstration. And then we go back to Flexify. This time we open it and we go the other way around. So we have as input the zenith and nadir, and as output the equirectangular. So I have saved this here already, and it flips over, and then we get here this undistorted back with a transparent area in the middle. I'll show you that here. This, and what we don't want to have, because we haven't worked at all on the top area, we just select this, we delete this, and then we have here exactly the floor nicely done. We only have to merge this, flatten image, and everything is fine. This can go then in Cinema 4D, and I will show you that even that small. I have to save this here, and I'll do this here maybe just for the purpose of speed on the desktop. So I need, of course, my profile here. It's always a good idea to have maximum quality, and again, this is very small. So I go here now to Cinema 4D, and yeah, I can use this file here. I don't have to have a new one. New material, and I want to have it in the luminance channel. Then I go here to load image as usual, desktop, and this is my panorama here. Load it in. I don't want to have it in my folder because I don't have any saved version so far, and we only have to drag this here on a sky object, for example, and as usual it's mirror sided, so -1 for the tile U, and then we can take a look here around, and when we render it we get a fairly rough image because the original file size was 12 times higher. And that sums it up for the first rough go through PTGUI one time. We do it now again, this time with HDRI in the next version, and see you there. Thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye bye.